Awesome. Cool. So today we're going to talk about above the line and below the line outreach and really thinking about account based prospecting holistically. And so we have James over here who runs BD over at Letterdrop, and we're going to talk about a little about how we were doing things before and what this new approach has really kind of like unlocked for us.
Cool. So, starting with breaking into new target accounts, I wanted to ask, how do you usually approach things, and how do you do things when you're trying to break in?
Yeah, I'm still a big believer in the phones. I think it's the most kind of direct and quickest way to reach someone. There are just a lot of people, though, that will never pick up the phone. If after 7 times calling someone, I don't get a pickup, they're probably never going to pick up. And I still need to find some way to reach these people.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm an example of a person who never picks up the phone. I've probably received 4 cold calls in my life when I accidentally pick up the phone. But but you probably try to reach people on email and LinkedIn, and those are all everything is pretty much a hard channel. LinkedIn's a little bit better than email, which has kind of gone down the drain recently. And so, just to give you an idea of what that looks like, people are constantly trying to pitch me stuff at any point in time. And this is my LinkedIn inbox, for example, and my email inbox is just a million times worse. So, we've established that just going straight to decision makers can be challenging. Taking a look at my own inbox, for example, and it's just a million times worse if I were, I don't know, the CTO of a like large enterprise or a 500-person company. Um, Way more people would be trying to pitch me stuff, and so that begs the question for if you are trying to do outbound, how do you actually get this person's attention? Obviously, there's marketing, which can serve to broaden awareness, so that when you do reach out, people are more inclined to respond. But the best way to maybe reach out to somebody is actually know their business inside and out and their priorities cold. And one of the ways in which you can do that or get a good observation is by doing your research. And there's so much public information out there. There's this whole ecosystem of signals companies, including ourselves at Letterdrop, where we help you identify changes in somebody's business that make what you're selling relevant. So you can start with that. And James, it sounds like you use a lot of these kinds of observations when you do reach out above the line as well, right?
For sure. I mean, it's definitely a really helpful starting place and can show me that, yeah, this person is probably more, willing to maybe take a meeting, or there's something there that'll be a great intro. But I kind of wanted something more, and that's when it felt like for me, there's a real opportunity in also reaching out to some people that are below the line at the org that can maybe give me some insight on stuff that's not like publicly available on the web.
The reality of the situation is in some cases there are no public signals or there are no good public signals. Like you can use proxies to get set initiatives, but unless you're an insider at the company, you're not privy to information that actually is moving projects at the business that maybe this decision maker is being blocked on. And your solution might be the perfect fit. You just don't know that they're running into that problem. And so, in a perfect world, what you would do is you would almost be an employee at the company. You would know exactly what's going on, and you would be able to say, "Hey, we have this problem. Turns out like there is a solution for this problem," and reach out. But you're obviously not. And so then the question is, okay, how do we get that insider intel, which, mind you, is very unique. Every other BDR person doing outbound doesn't have access to this. Public signals, everyone has the same access to public signals. And so at some point, they do get saturated. Everyone's going to say, "Hey, just saw you raised a new round of funding." Or everyone's going to say, "Hey, I saw you just joined this new role 2 months ago and you probably have budget to spend." And so when everybody does it, it's no longer special. And so I think that's where insider information comes. Personally, for me, somebody's outbounded to me and they used information that they've discovered from talking to people or observing people on my team that I found very helpful. I'll give you an example of this. So I received this message from somebody and they told me about something that James was maybe perhaps struggling with. And that catches my attention. I was like, wait a minute, are you telling me something about my organization, my business that I didn't know about? Are you educating me about a problem that we have and that I have to have an internal conversation and help somebody out or think about something? And so that was something that definitely caught my attention. And I ignore 100 emails that come my way. I do not ignore this because you've caught my attention by saying like, hey, I know somebody at your company and I've learned a little bit about your priorities. Yeah. So maybe James, what we can talk about is how you've changed your approach in terms of going from straight above the line to also trying to gather that intel, like that person who just reached out to me, like what's your approach been?
Yeah. I've been focusing more on reaching out to some below the line folks before reaching out to decision makers. What's worked for me is, say, connecting with 5 BDRs on a team. And then I've been seeing like maybe like 60-70% of them connecting. So say I'm now having a conversation with 3 of them. I'm getting a lot of intel that can be really helpful. Here's an example of my below the line messaging. The goal of this is to get as much information as possible that could be useful when I'm reaching out to someone above the line. The kind of information I'm looking for is maybe what's in their tech stack, if there are any like company-wide or specific like sales initiatives or priorities, maybe more broadly speaking, how their company thinks about AI and tech adoption. I don't really want to start with a question like that because that could be pretty pointed and get someone on the defensive. So here I'm asking kind of a broad question that can hopefully end up bringing me down the path towards the information that I want. So yeah, when I'm using messaging like that, that's very casual, but also with some questions that hopefully get at some answers I'm trying to get in terms of like what their tech stack is. Like, what does LinkedIn look like as a channel for them right now? Are they having any success there? If not, why? Like, what are some priorities right now at the org? Like, are they having trouble on calls with connect rates, etc.? There's just like a lot of information I can get from talking with BDRs that can be super helpful when reaching out to above the line people.
Yeah. And I want to point out that in your case, you were reaching out to BDR specifically, but this strategy can be used pretty much for anybody. So for example, if you're selling to a VP of HR, you can go talk to the IC folks in the HR organization at the company. The problem is decision makers get pitched a lot. They get a lot of outbound towards them. And so since there's so much noise, they start to filter it all out. If you're an individual contributor, fewer people are reaching out to you and not many people are trying to sell you things necessarily. And so when someone reaches out to you just to gather information, not selling you anything, especially if they're friendly about it, or heck, maybe they even incentivize you to give them an answer, maybe like send you a gift card or something along those lines, which makes sense for enterprise types of sales where information is valuable. That gives you a lot of, that gives you the success rate that you can in terms of gathering intel. And IC is more likely to say like, yeah, like this is what's going on, boots on the ground, and this is what I'm struggling with. And you're much more likely to get a higher reply rate there. So James, for example, he's getting a 60% reply rate because he's reaching out to people with the same job title. If you were a BDR or reaching out to somebody with a different job title who was not in sales, you're maybe not going to get a 60% reply rate, but you're probably going to get like a 20-30% reply rate, which is still valuable intel for you. And so that's, if you kind of extrapolate that across your target accounts, and now you know that across your 100 target accounts, you can gather unique intel on maybe 20-25% of them which let you go straight to the decision maker and speak directly to their priorities, that's very powerful. And so now that you've gathered this intel, you can go to the decision maker. I guess, James, a question for you is, how do you make sure you're asking the right questions when you're going below the line? Because obviously, if you ask the wrong questions, which don't actually give you information that's useful to the decision maker, it's kind of like a waste, right?
Yeah, and this has been a bit of a learning process. I think this is something you might have to try for a little bit and like iterate on and see what questions are actually getting you the info you want. For me, it's less helpful to just broadly understand like, oh, are you booking meetings on LinkedIn? If I can understand like, are they pretty like tech forward and like trying out a bunch of new tools? Like, yeah, that probably means they're a little more open to trying something. If I also understand that like, yeah, they like just raised like what their targets are in terms of like quota. These are like real pain points, and I think can like make it a lot easier to then have information that'll be valuable.
Yeah. And once again, very specific to BDRs, but you ask the question that you feel like somebody would be comfortable answering and gives you the intel needed to go above the line and say, hey, this is what I learned your team is struggling with, or this is what I learned. I know these are your priorities right now. Let me show you, almost like an inside consultant, how I would help, how you could potentially solve that problem. So you're essentially adding value to the conversation, you're educating them, and you're doing work for them, which makes it very, very hard for them to say no, and very easy for you to stand out against every single person who's outbounding to them. Um, Maybe you could walk me through an example of like what your success looks like now that you're doing both below the line and above the line outreach.
Yeah. I don't have a massive sample size yet, but even in just the last few weeks, I would say I'm booking almost twice the number of meetings from LinkedIn, because when I am reaching out to these decision makers, uh, they are hearing me out more. I am getting like a higher response rate, and even more than that, I'm speaking about something that I'm almost certain is relevant to them. And I find that it's like both an easier conversation that I'm having with them. There's a little more trust built there. And it is resulting in, more meetings, which is like, what we're hoping for.
Yeah. And so just to kind of recap what this looks like at the highest level, what we're doing is we're staggering our outreach. So if you're the seller, this is what James is doing, for example, is you first divide the contacts at the company into above the line and below the line. You're not going to reach out to your decision maker immediately. What you're going to do is try to understand who's below the line, who reports to them, and you're going to reach out to these people. You're going to ask them about their day-to-day overall organization priorities. There's no pitch whatsoever. You may or may not want to experiment and try seeing, talking about like, hey, like being very open in terms of, hey, I'm trying to learn something so that I can help whatever the decision maker, Katie, think through something. And so you reach out, you get responses at a fairly high clip, and you learn their internal priorities and challenges. And that's pretty much it. That's all you're trying to do. And now when you reach out to the decision maker, what you're doing is you're taking and synthesizing that information, and you're educating the decision maker on what's going on in their organization, their priorities, and you're helping them almost like build a plan for how they might want to fix that problem. And in James's case, in just the past couple of weeks, he's seen like a 2x booking rate and much higher reply rate as well. One of the things you want to be wary of is how you message that to the decision maker. Some people below the line may not be comfortable with you mentioning that conversation to them. So James, how have you handled that previously?
Yeah, I think it's always best to be pretty transparent about maybe what you'll use this information for. Some people will be okay with you mentioning their name. Others would want to remain anonymous, and I think that's totally fair. And then I think, yeah, it's still, maybe will be a little bit less effective than name dropping. But if you're, bringing valuable information that they know, like it's pretty obvious you had a conversation, with someone at their company about, it's still very helpful.
And like James said, I think if you can say, hey, I spoke to XYZ on your team, that really does stand out. If you can't, for whatever reason, even saying, like, I spoke to some folks on your team and learned this about your business is still pretty darn effective. If this is something you're thinking about changing going into the new year, and you want to talk about how you could implement a below the line, above the line sort of account based prospecting motion at your company and automate a lot of the intel gathering and below the line outbound, definitely talk to us at Letterdrop. We can help you think through this strategically and also show you how tools like Letterdrop could ease the burden of doing this for you.